These are ominous times. And how do we get out of them is the question. I think we've talked about a lot about the problems. Let's talk about how to get out of them. And this piece caught my attention in The Hub, a great commentary outlet that I've written for a couple of times, The Importance of Economic Liberalism. It's by Daniel Dufort, the president and CEO of the Montreal Economic Institute. And he joins me now. Monsieur Dufort, hello.
Thank you very much for having me, Dan.
Thanks for joining us. So, as I mentioned, this piece to me seems like it's focusing on the solution. And when we talk about the problems and everything happening, we look to our federal leaders, especially Trudeau and Poilievre, and I'm not seeing any solutions. What kind of solutions will an economically liberal philosophy bring Canada?
Right. So if we look at some of the economic malaise that we are going through right now, it relates in good part to inflation, especially price inflation. And one of the things that would help with this, and Scotiabank has been very effective in pointing it out, is that we need to rein in government spending. Government spending and deficits are adding fuel to the inflation problem and making it harder for the central bank to lower the rates, which would alleviate pressures that we are feeling.
Earlier in the show, I spoke to a Montreal city councillor. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about this. And I asked her, well, we were talking about how the city's dirty and, there's not this resource, not that resource. And we said, well, it just comes down to money. And so I said, well, what do you want to do about that? And her answer was, well, place the money differently, just shift it around, maybe not on this priority, do on this priority instead. And that to me is a frustrating answer because there's no politician in Canada right now at any level, I think, that seems to be talking about generating revenue. Is that some kind of allergy? Like why are politicians not talking about growth right now?
Well, I don't think this would be a good moment for them to talk about increasing taxes. We are already facing a very high tax burden. I do not think that governments are lacking money right now. If we look, let's say, at the government of Quebec, it has increased spending by roughly 40% in the past 6 years, and we're not seeing the results. I don't think that the issue is that there's not enough money in the system. I think that we need more creative solutions, and we need to allocate resources in a way that's more efficient. When you talk about municipalities, if we look at the global compensation of municipal employees, they are extremely well paid. So there was a lot of money that is, I wouldn't say wasted, but maybe misallocated.
So I understand in terms of employees, a lot of we see think tanks saying that there's too much money going to employees and all that, but in real politics, that's not going to change, right? So I don't agree necessarily that cutting or austerity is the way to go about this when this province is allergic to these terms. Wouldn't it be better to talk about growing the economy, selling off the SAQ? I don't know. We're going to put ideas on the table with the callers in a few minutes, but when I'm talking about generating revenue, I mean growing the economy, growing our GDP.
Certainly, there's a way to liberalize the economy. When you look at Alberta in the 90s, they had a vast project like this where they liberalized the economy, moved away from government control of certain sectors. Certainly in Quebec, there would be a way to boost our economic output by having different solutions when it comes to alcohol sales with the ACQ, which is not at all an efficient way of going about it, or even with hydroelectricity or electricity period, where we could have small producers that could alleviate the pressure on the system. Certainly when it comes to businesses who are trying to find supply and who are being told no by Hydro-Quebec because they're facing shortages. We need an abundance of electricity if we want to be able to power up our economy. And right now it is lacking in Quebec. So certainly this is something that we should tackle sooner rather than later.
For Quebec policy and programs, I wonder if the term universality is a good way to attack the problem, because in Quebec it seems like whether it's daycare or other issues, everything has to be universal. Everyone has to have complete access to it. No one has to pay a dime. Universality has its consequences economically, right? Because if everyone is treated the same, at the end of the day, there's going to be losers in that system.
Well, absolutely. And it's not because and I want to distinguish two things. Like, a program can be universal without being publicly delivered. So when we look at the healthcare system, which is facing very real problems in Canada, and certainly patients are the victims, we have the system where everybody's covered. They are. And everything is also delivered by the public system, by the government. And they're not able to provide care in a timely manner to many people. Whereas you look to Europe and everyone is covered, but entrepreneurs are able to provide those services to the population in a much more timely manner. So there's a way of doing things differently while leaving no one behind. And we're not doing that.
It's especially stark in healthcare, and I'm wondering if your organization, the Economic Institute, has taken a position on copays. I know there's some private doctors who have been arguing this in the past, a small nominal fee to access the Quebec healthcare system for those that can afford it. Do you think that might be a solution to inject more money in the system?
Well, certainly it is a solution that's already in place in many jurisdictions that we would contend are extremely progressive, such as Sweden. I don't think that it is the biggest thing that we can do to regenerate our healthcare system. I think what we need is more entrepreneurs being able to provide services. Even emergency care is something where we could turn to entrepreneurs to provide more services while still being covered by the RAMQ. I think that would be something more potent than copays. I'm not against copays per se, but I just don't think they're the most impactful measure that we could bring forward.
And just zooming out a little bit in terms of how we look at the United States, what could we do to be more inspired by our cousins to the south in terms of economic policy?
Well, in terms of economic policy, I think what we need to do is to cut red tape in this country. Regulation is sucking out the air from so many sectors. When you look at construction in Quebec, with over 20 different types of jobs and permits that you have to get to be able to do certain tasks, it becomes a humongous task for entrepreneurs to be able to carry out the work in a way that, quite frankly, just makes sense. We see this in so many sectors of our economy, maybe dairy, with the supply managed system. These are the things that stifle innovation and are not helping Canadians prosper at all.
Daniel Dufort is the president and CEO of the Montreal Economic Institute. You can read his piece in the Hub in both languages, Why Economic Liberalism Still Matters. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Dan.